Welcome to another monthly Research Hub community call, where the first topic that we have today is from Jeff, discussing kind of the big picture goals for our new peer review on bioRxiv preprints program. So yeah, take it away, Jeff.
Actually, this one stemmed from a discussion that a couple of the community members were having in the general chat, which was like, what's the intention and what are we trying to get out of like publicly peer reviewing preprints? What does that give the scientific community that they didn't have previously? And so just kind of it's like taking a step back from doing that to maybe touch base a little bit to see what do we feel like we're giving and offering to people in the scientific community when we do that? Do they really want that or need it? And is it really pushing the mission of accelerating the pace of scientific research? So yeah, just wanted to open the floor to anybody.
Yeah, so to jump in first, the number one thing that I think would be attractive about, like, if I had stumbled across this on Twitter is like, oh, someone's paying for peer review. Like, it's possible to get compensated for doing like peer reviews of public preprints. That's kind of cool. So it's part of me thinks like the content is interesting and valuable, but almost more interesting is the opportunity represented by the content. If that makes sense.
Yes, it's like I think I guess there's two selling points, quote unquote selling points. One of them is a selling point to if you want to be an editor, you can actually get compensated for it. And then the other selling point is if you're a scientist and you post your paper, you can get feedback on it in a really timely manner. So I guess that one addresses the, hey, if I'm interested in being an editor, I'll get compensated for my work.
Yeah, so direct feedback, like real life feedback that I got last week when I was in Milan, basically talking about what we do, from talking with postdocs and PhDs. One thing they were really excited about when I told them about the peer reviews is exactly like getting initial feedback before you submit to the journal, so that maybe it's not that much of a feedback, but it's maybe like those like one or two comments that could be one thing that you don't have to address when the review comes back. So I think that is definitely a selling point. Then obviously, if you want to make that point stronger, you need to have a body of people that are actually capable of like giving really good critique and feedback on a specific topic. But I think we're headed in the right direction, because in my opinion, the first element, the incentivization element, is what is probably going to bring the people in, and then the body of knowledge, the body of like the expertise of the people is going to grow as we grow as well. So the second point is also going to strengthen as we grow.
Okay, that's actually really good feedback, because I received that feedback from the first author of one of the papers I peer reviewed. And actually, Johnny went and he posted on our peer review alerts Twitter, and she actually ended up retweeting the post, and she DM'd me personally and said, oh, thank you for the peer review. We actually are already looking into a lot of the comments that you had made on there. So at least if it wasn't actually helpful, we were on the right track of those contents being helpful because they were already working on adjusting those things. So that seems like the value we can bring to people. I think an end state for these, which is going to require, I think, a lot more business development and like interaction with universities, is to make our peer reviews validated for a peer review that would impact the career of the person. So, right now they're waiting to go publish in a journal, and the journal will give them peer reviews and they're officially published. I think if we can get to that point with our peer reviews being weighted the same as that, then people will be happy too, because it's a quick turnaround and they're not losing out on a career, boost.
One thing this makes me think of, just of like the structure of the program, like maybe the way that we should be presenting this is like Tyler posts a preprint, from bioRxiv, and then like somebody else puts a bounty on it, and then a third person does the peer review. So because I feel like there's a value within, I'm a scientist, I need feedback, I'll put a bounty on this, to get the peer review, from the community person, maybe rather than, you know, like kind of like a mini APC type of situation that encourages another third party to come in and do the peer review.
And then in that, I like that structure. Who would be putting up the bounty for that peer review? Do you think the author of the preprint would be willing to put up a bounty to get that feedback?
Down the line, yeah, eventually. I think like we could probably subsidize it, you know, to get started, but just to show like the use case of you share a preprint, you put a bounty on it, you'll get feedback.
I think one thing, Pat, for this is if we can maybe through the ResearchHub community account on the platform, maybe use some of those funds earned from bounty fees, put those towards helping subsidize some of those peer reviews, and then you have kind of like a cyclical economy of we earn fees, put that back towards subsidizing bounties for peer review.
Oh, that's ridiculously cool. That's really, really cool. Because then it makes you feel good when you do the bounty, like you're kind of contributing to this pot of community peer reviews.
Yeah, so you feel it's almost like the money you're putting towards something and the fee that's being taken is almost going towards it's going towards a donation. You know, it's almost like charitable. You know, so it does feel kind of good. So yeah, I think we should look into this bounty for peer review option a lot more. Mullik?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on along the lines of what you and Patrick were, mentioning was one, I think if we keep doing this, then it will like get our name out there with like not only just the traditional like academic researchers, but a lot more also on the other DSci communities. I think us as a platform, will the role that we can play in this whole like ecosystem is how we can get interaction of scientists more easily on our platform and peer review and better help with the literature search that everybody needs. Like that's like the first thing that I can foresee our platform doing. And so right now it may seem like, okay, like, I picked and I haven't received any feedback from any authors. I've done like 2 or 3 of this, but I feel like if we keep doing it for months and months, then eventually BioRix will also like acknowledge us and people will see that, oh, there is definitely value in this. I think we'll have to create the value. Right now, it may not seem like every paper we review would be helpful, but eventually, we will be heard. And there is a significant amount of lack of dissent amongst academic researchers right now with the amount of like earnings that journals do and scientists and reviewers are not getting paid. I mean, we also like Glaucoma Flecken has been like posting and stuff. So I think we are at the right time. If we just keep up at it, then we might eventually get the public that we need.
Okay, so what I'm hearing again is this seems like there's an emphasis on the review, the editors being paid, and that's something that we need to convey the message of more, because I know that there was that neuroimaging journal where all of the peer reviewers and editors just kind of uprooted and left, and it does seem to be creating quite the buzz around in the scientific community. So okay, so keep heads forward and then emphasize the paid peer review. Tyler, and then we'll go Cole and Johnny.
Yeah, I think this also brings us a lot closer to the ultimate goal of ResearchHub, which is like accelerating the pace of science. So it'll do this because like we're getting more towards the discrete publications where when you review in public, then you can see these incremental gains and then also get your reviews of like what you should change a whole lot faster in a public forum. Then you get closer to this like iterating in public and incremental gains where you don't have to like wait for this macro publication. You can kind of just publish initially on what the small thing is and then extend it.
Again, a messaging of like iterate in public and making incremental gains.
Yeah, and just hitting home that like there's friction in science that doesn't need to be there and maybe overly formalized.
Okay. Perfect. Cool.
Yeah, I just want to echo, like you, Jeff, I've had one of the first authors of the publications reach out to me after I posted the peer review because I tagged them on Twitter, and they came out with a bunch of comments and were very thankful of the ultimately minor edits, but still something that could reject them from a journal by not having everything just succinctly together. Also, in terms of getting the peer reviews out there, maybe it's something we should consider of also posting the peer reviews on the comment section of bioRxiv, because it has a spot for that. So that also brings visibility to ResearchHub. And then as we get further down the line, maybe we could cement some guidelines to ensure the quality of the peer reviews. So that way, like when people come to ResearchHub, they know what to kind of expect. Because right now the peer reviews are kind of all over the place, and we don't really have a standardized way of making sure we have quality peer reviews.
Yeah, that's really good feedback. Like, because I think sometimes it's a game of inches with getting published. So like if you can help them with that, even little things like even like grammatical things sometimes, or like just the way that a figure is laid out, something's hard to read, or like those things are very helpful to them. And definitely the comments on bioRxiv. I'm making a note of this in like a personal notes, and I can post all those notes publicly afterwards. But I think that'd be a good one to comment in bioRxiv. Unless we can get to a point where bioRxiv would just alert people if a peer review happens from us. And then the last point, Cole, was the variability in the quality of the peer reviews. And we definitely noticed that. And notice when there's like a really high quality one, and notice when something is a few sentences. So I think we want to keep it open for the first couple months just to see what gets thrown out there. But I think it's now time to really kind of, have to filter away some of the people that are not putting quality peer review commentary out there. And if they want to put quality peer review commentary, then they can go and fulfill a bounty for a peer review, and then they can earn whatever income from that. All right, Johnny.
Okay, yeah, first of all, great for that, how like Jeffrey and Cole are corroborating the evidence that Ricardo gathered in Milan. Basically, people appreciate pre-publication commentary, and I do think that in terms of adding the value, that's exactly where you add the value to a preprint. If you give somebody free advice that helps them get published, that's definitely appreciated, I think. But what I wanted to talk about is that since I am making the post on Twitter to promote this, I didn't really put the emphasis that the editors are getting paid so much on the forefront. But I didn't know how important that was, so I'm glad I'm here. I only told people that if they interact with the content, they can earn tokens. But how do you want me to put it out? Like, do you have any advice for me? Because the person I'm talking to cannot straightforwardly get paid, right? So I could tell them about applying to become an editor, or what can I, how can I engage them?
Yeah, one thing that I like that you do in the post, Johnny, is you try to tag, if they have a Twitter, the peer reviewer, right? So you'd like, tag my handle, or you tag Cole's handle. Maybe like a little like snippet in there right before that. You can just be like, and our, paid peer reviewer Cole, who received compensation for this peer review, or something like that, just so it's alerted that people are receiving. It's like a little more subtle than it is just a blatant, hey, we're paying everyone. Ooh. But maybe we want to be blatant. So I don't know what everyone else thinks.
Okay, then wait, I will wait for a little bit.
I think this is tricky, Johnny. Like, I think we should kind of throw a lot of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. So maybe like try a bunch of different tweets, ranges of subtlety, and then see which one you like the best.
The other approach is that like I have almost assembled that, like a couple of questions for the editors, and just like mention it there. Like we talked about this last time, Patrick, and then you said that like the editor of the month idea. And it doesn't necessarily have to be of the month, but I like that too, that we have an editor of the month, but it would also be nice to also just have this meet the editors. And in that post, you can also mention it. It's like, hey, this guy is making research coins from making peer reviews, and then what's your experience? Then it's sort of legit to mention it. Okay, and then another thing that I had, maybe we could talk about how I could distribute this once I have made the questions. And then one thing is that Jeffrey mentioned that he was talking about the end game of what this could be like, and how one thing that it reminded me of is that a lot of journals and conferences are struggling to find peer reviewers. It's difficult. They need 2 peer reviewers per thing, so they could be the ones putting up bounties because they're actually scrambling to find somebody to review stuff. And yeah, that's one thing that where there is at least a pain point where people might need this.
Yeah, so you're saying maybe we need to open up a dialogue between us and some of these journals that are needing the peer reviewers. And this is something we've talked about before. Definitely me and Ricardo have about like offering peer review as a service. That's like ResearchHub's, what ResearchHub's good at is curating the peer reviewers because we're paying them. And then the journals can come to try to get those curated peer reviewers from us.
Yeah. Well, okay, that now I had too many points mixed, but it would still be interesting to talk about how to distribute the questions to the editors, because I don't see anything wrong with like doing it sort of all at once and and then posting it one by one. And
Cole, did you have a commentary on Johnny's point there?
Yeah, in regards to contacting the journals, I know that like there are a lot of journals at these conferences. Would it be worthwhile even just buying some advertising space at the conferences to set up like a competitive situation where, hey, one of the features is we pay our editors at a competitive rate, and we have examples of quality peer reviews. So instead of going through the whole application process of the journals, come to ResearchHub and just get your things peer reviewed by bringing attention to it, because we are also looking for people that want their items peer reviewed. Or maybe taking out like advertising space on Twitter for that, like making a specific post like, hey, we want to look at your preprints. Post them here and we'll peer review them.
I like it. So put the money towards towards an advertising on ResearchHub Foundation's Twitter, just to see like how successful it would be and like what the reach was and things like that. So I'll take a look at some of like the metrics that came out of that and see how impactful it is. And then we can maybe consider doing 2 initiatives. Maybe that's an action item out of here, which is going to be looking at advertising space. Worth the money more than like our Twitter kind of advertising would be. So that's an action item that can come out of this. Cole, would you be interested in looking into something like that? Yeah.
Yeah, I could look into that. If we can talk a little bit more about fleshing out the specific details of what that would entail afterwards.
Yeah,
then,
yeah.
yeah.
Once we have a good like baseline of just, are we talking order of magnitude difference in pricing? Then yeah, then we can go from there.
Okay, super.
All right, awesome. Good feedback. Johnny?
Yeah, one last thing that I have on my mind is like regarding the payment. What the thing that you suggested is also a very good way to make it more visible that you are getting paid for peer review. So if we could exactly implement it, that the peer reviewers would say claim the bounties, and that make that a visible process, then it looks like constantly to the outside, it looks like there's random engagement. So you could just be the one who claims it first. Right? So that is a good idea to, without saying it, just show it.
Okay. The audio was cutting out a bit, Johnny, but I think what I got out of it was, rather than just stating it, show the process of a bounty going up for peer review and then someone answering the peer review, and just outline that process publicly so it's seen and doesn't have to be said.
Exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let me jot that down right now. But is there any other hands up on this topic? I don't want to kind of monopolize the whole hour with this topic, but if there's anything else anyone wants to mention, feel free to.
Yeah. One quick thing on that. If we're talking about Twitter posts for advertising, like say the process of peer review or just a blatant advertisement, like we can do split testing to specifically see which does better if that's part of an advertising budget. So we can test it feet on the ground and see what works.
Yeah, I think that's the best approach for all the things we're doing this early on, is we just need to try a few things like Patrick was mentioning and just see what fits. But the key that we need to ensure that we are assessing.
Jeff, I'm sorry. I don't know if it's me, but I can't hear you very well.
Yeah, you're probably covering the microphone. Are you?
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, like I was saying, so I think what Patrick was saying and what you just said, Cole, which is we try a bunch of things in parallel, see what works really well. But the one important thing with that, and I think something we haven't done very well in the past, is like making sure we have metrics and KPIs that really would alert us that we're doing well in this domain versus that domain. So if we push an initiative, just a reminder to like really set the metric that we want to look out of this appropriately, so we can say with confidence that it is better this way than that way. Okay, so I'm going to finish jotting down some of the notes that Johnny and Cole just mentioned, but I think Patrick, the next one might be a you topic, right?
Yeah, totally. That was a good discussion, though. Thank you, Jeff. So one thing I wanted to grab you guys' opinion on is the meta study feature. Kobe's releasing a new paper page here in the next couple of days where, like, in theory, we'll be able to extract PDFs and turn them into HTML and actually like have the paper in the paper page and be able to do cool things like highlighting and inline commenting. And so we're kind of sprucing up like we're calling it the document page, but basically like the page you land on when clicking into a post or a paper or a question or anything else on ResearchHub. And so the meta study feature is like one of those document page like features. And in theory, it's pretty different than like a lot of the other document pages. And so supporting it is kind of like time consuming and will like take engineering resources away from actually building new stuff. And so we're thinking about deprecating it, and kind of as like a post-mortem, like we'd like to hear like what everyone's thoughts are on the meta studies feature, and like why do we think like people weren't totally using it, and like I think there are interesting ways it could come back in the future. But yeah, just wanted to like grab like I think sort of post-mortem feedback from everybody on like why they think it didn't work.
I think the most complex. So first of all, I like the feature. I was one of the early supporters of the feature. I just think that UX wise is just complex to make, because just like you're literally like putting out a concept and trying to find what is for, what is against a specific claim. And so it takes time. It takes a decent amount of curation by different people, because if I do it alone, it doesn't really matter. You need a bunch of people doing it, and you need to see like kind of like excitement around a specific question so that you want to contribute. And so I think it's a mix of like a complex UX in general, not like how we built it, in just a general complex to build this feature, and kind of like probably like a lacking network effect around the feature. That is probably what made it fail. If you were to ask me.
Yeah, that's amazing diagnosis, Ricardo. Thank you. That's awesome. Does anybody else have thoughts?
I would say, sorry, Jeff, go. Sorry.
I just wanted to make a quick comment that I was kind of surprised that the meta studies feature didn't take off. I thought it was like a really compelling one, and I actually talked to a couple people in my lab, and they were really like excited about the meta studies aspect of ResearchHub or on ResearchHub, but then they would never, like, they didn't use it. So that was like kind of interesting to me. So it feels like there's a discrepancy with like there's an interest in it, but for some reason there was no usage of it. And so I wonder if the concept there is the right concept, but like Ricardo was saying, the implementation maybe needs to get tweaked, but that's a lot of work to go back and forth on implementing it. So yeah, I don't know, just something I've heard from some of the people in my lab.
Yeah, no, that's also super helpful. It is a compelling concept for sure. Like to be able to, like have evidence laid out like in like stacked ranked order supporting a theory or negating it is definitely like it seems like pretty cool. It is a lot of work though. It's like a review paper basically to do.
Is there a place where like we AI this and like instead of people putting in the work, like we have the AI really try to rank this, and then maybe what people get paid for is like the reinforcement learning of like how well they think the AI did in ranking that?
Yeah, 100%. That's what I think will probably happen in the future. Is this feels like a lot more natural occurring within the notebook. You're like saving references. Maybe some references are suggested. People are annotating the references like through the notebook. Maybe it's all in like one folder people are working on. But yeah, even that, like maybe that's a better like interface for people to interact with this feature, but it's still going to be tough to get the actual like incentives right. Like who gets rewarded for what, who knows when what is right. It's definitely a complicated thing.
Totally. Yeah, sorry, Nathan, I took over some time.
No, that's all right. Question for Patrick. What's the timeline on which you were thinking it was going to be removed?
It's sometime within the next week or two. There's like no like total rush for it, but when we ship the new paper page, we'll probably end up removing that feature just because it'll be inconsistent with the design.
Okay, yeah, just because, to be honest, I have an application for it that I could try because I have been collecting these papers about GLP-1 agonists. And to be honest, it just slipped my mind that we had a meta studies feature that it would be suited for. But I mean, if the decision's been made, then that's fine. But to be honest, I think it was a pretty good feature. I completely agree with Ricardo. I think it was just a question of it not being incentivized in the same way. It would have been interesting if, for instance, we had editors have the option of creating a meta study rather than a peer review for a month. See how that went. But yeah, obviously, I think it was one of those where it's even slipped my mind as someone who tries to keep up to date with ResearchHub's features that it was an option. So I think it's just one of those things where when you have a lot of different features, one can often slip off the edge.
Totally.
One quick thing on the reinforcement learning, it could be really cool if in the reference manager that users are prompted with a question when they close a paper saying like, how would you rate the rigor of the study? Or like, how are the methods rated? In order to just gather like consensus feedback about how papers are, just with a quick 1 or 2 questions.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there are a lot of really cool things we can do, I think, with an LLM and like use like some of the unique aspects of ResearchHub, which is like our audience and kind of ability to measure reputation and have that feedback into a model somehow. Cool. Yeah, Nathan, thank you. That's definitely helpful. It is a cool idea. And I think it also might be another thing where like, if enough people were doing it, then more people would. But it's hard to kind of like do something all by yourself and not see any like interaction or like meaningful feedback, because it does take a lot of work to even read somebody else's and be like, oh, is this paper relevant? There's a lot of just work in general around it. Yeah, anybody else have any thoughts?
Just like to like connect that with like a really like a higher point, which is I think there's like a lot of things on ResearchHub just generally that do require like a fair bit of bandwidth to do on the platform. Like I guess clicking an upvote or a downvote, not too much, but if you want to do it properly, you probably have to assess the thing you're upvoting and downvoting pretty well. But I do think that's like a little barrier for like a weekly active contributor kind of goal. So what I'm really excited for is definitely kind of like a reference manager type of thing where you can do really lightweight actions that will reflect activity on the platform. But I think right now there's a lot of like, deep, hours of work type of things that are on there.
Yeah, totally. 100%. Because even like a weekly active contributor in this case could just be someone browsing PubMed and clicking like save to reference manager. and then that data, ends up showing up on researchhub.com. So yeah, that is, the barrier is like even much lower than upvoting, I think.
I think another thing relating to that is I could see a meta studies feature working quite well with our notebook feature. So if you could create a notebook to start with when you're collecting papers in studies and you haven't quite worked out which ones are pros, which ones are cons, and how you're going to frame this into a question, but then easily convert that so that you transfer the notebook papers into a meta study, then actually perhaps you could see people transitioning to using that more, rather than having to go down one way or the other when they first start collecting.
Totally. Yeah, I think this will come back in like a V2 kind of, with the combination of the reference manager, like an LLM, and an integration to the notebook, where you can ask a question, hey, like, is the Earth flat, right? And then it'll populate all of the papers that say the Earth is flat and all the papers that say the Earth isn't flat. And then we can have the community provide feedback on those selections to improve them. Cool. Yeah, no, this is super helpful. Any last thoughts from you guys that I can report back to the rest of the team? Or
can I make a quick broader point? Is that I think the meta studies feature, along with some of the other ones, is a situation where I think it's very hard to assess the usefulness of a feature in isolation, when, for instance, you could see a realm where reference manager, bounties, peer reviews, and meta studies all work together once they're all, at a certain level of usability where actually they sync with each other. And if we, if you trial one and then take it out, it might not quite give you the full picture.
yeah, totally. Even now, like leaving comments like under other people's papers, if I use like another paper to reference, like you have to click into it, grab the figure, grab the actual data point, when eventually like we'll have it where it can be almost just like a YouTube, or not YouTube, but Wikipedia preview link, where like it's really easy to like add to your comment, and then others can just like hover over it, see the relevant data point, why it applies to the paper you're currently on. Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff, like low-hanging fruit, that we can do around references that'll make it like pretty nice to use ResearchHub.
I was just thinking in terms of usability, like meta studies completely slipped my mind. In terms of visibility, would it be better to maybe format the website so that way there's a visual banner that scrolls through all of the things that are being offered? So that way it puts it more prominently on people's mind. So that way, for example, like the tabs as they are right now, there's all papers, posts, questions, meta studies, bounties. If it had the way that other websites do, where it just scrolls through every 3 or 4 seconds, so even if people are on the homepage just passively, it brings it up on their radar.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think like a larger issue that we have in general with our current website is like the most interesting content, you can't really see it from the homepage. Like you see the titles of the paper, but like if Nathan spends 4 hours reading the paper and doing a peer review, you can't see that effort from the homepage. And so I think meta studies are kind of somewhere where it's a lot of effort, and like you can't really see anything interesting, until you click into it. So yeah, we have thoughts on like how more like standard social media feeds rather than like a Reddit style feed could be better to help uncover some of that. But we even had an idea like a while ago, and this has come up multiple times, of like a Instagram stories type of thing at the top of the page, where like specific posts are like intentionally put there for people to kind of flip through. So that way, like we could highlight, all the different features of ResearchHub rather than you having to like specifically look for a meta study or something like that. But so I guess like one point that I want to like ask everybody is, how many people just kind of like forgot they existed? Like, is that like a common feeling due to the like lack of visibility? Almost everyone. Okay, cool. That's good to know.
Also, I would keep in mind that some features might not work. Like some features might be network dependent. So we might see that this feature is like has been not a great success, but maybe you get 10x the people, and the feature that would be used the most is actually the meta study one. So I feel like it's complicated to judge features because it depends on like so many different criteria and parameters. So that in general, I think we did a really good think about, in building so many things so that, when, actually gonna have more people will see what they like the most out of all the things that we built.
Yeah, this is really interesting insight. Thank you all. Even just like the ability to surface or bring attention to like new stuff that we're building would be useful. So like, yeah, we definitely need to think about how to do that better. Cool. Yes, that's all I had for that topic. Jeff, do you want to talk about AI, or I can do like basically marketing feedback for the reference manager or manager landing page?
I think you could do that one, Patrick, and then if we've got extra time, we could like briefly touch on the AI stuff, but it's not too important.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'll share a screen here. Hold on 1 second. And so the concept here is, since the reference manager is a little bit of a standalone product, we want to have like a landing page we can send people to that's more marketing in nature, where it's basically like, hey, like here's why you should use the ResearchHub reference manager versus like any other competitor. So yeah, this is like a very early copy, but what do you all think are the arguments that we should highlight, like first and foremost when people like come to this landing page?
I think you should be focusing on the usability and how seamless it would be. Because if you're using a reference manager, at least when I was doing more of that, it always felt clunky and like a very specific process that I needed to go and put it in the reference manager afterwards. And less so on the features, but just with you scrolling over, would it be valuable to color brand it to ResearchHub's colors, or is that not a priority?
You mean like these colors versus these ones?
Yeah, like just having the color branding of ResearchHub consistent.
Yeah, I think we would definitely do that. These are like very early options, so just more so to like extremely high level show what these could look like. But yeah, they'll probably end up looking something like this.
I think, Pat, one of the things to emphasize more that I like didn't see at least at the top of some of these banners was like you can get rewarded for your scientific or your using of the reference manager. I think that's like a kind of big one because I mean there's a lot of throughput that goes into a reference manager. So even if like the reward per like discrete unit that's going in is not high, there's a large volume going in, and I think that could be something like as a grad student who are like probably the biggest users of a reference manager, I would say that that would be something compelling for them. And I think that's like a unique selling point that we have. I think like what Cole was saying, which is like essentially bringing reference managers to like the modern age is one thing, to make it look just like a techie thing, but then also getting rewarded is another big one that sets us apart and I think would be compelling for a grad student.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, those are great arguments for sure. I guess like Jeff, how would you like to see the getting rewarded like phrased basically? Like earn for your data, or
like it depends what we're gonna like reward for. Yeah, like earn for your data or get rewarded for using or something like that, or maybe even just at the top like organized papers get rewarded, something like that.
okay, cool. And that's a great point.
I'm curious, what is everyone else's opinion on like the actual reward or like the incentive reward and advertising it through that way? Do you guys think that's like too much on the rewards thing, or because in my eyes I think that's an important thing, but I don't know if that's the case with a lot of other scientists. Yeah, Malik.
Yeah, I think initially the reward thing is a good idea because it will, as you said, like draw attention of grad students. But then once they are on the page, then they will say, oh, this has the other functions too, like that, like the lab notebook is going to be synced in with it. So I can pretty much write the paper entirely on here. and not have to use the Word document processor at all. And by the way, I can also connect with all those other scientists in my field. So, but the reward will bring, other utilities in Limelight too. So definitely some reward initially.
That's good to know, Malik. And that's an interesting perspective. I think we're like 50-50 between like, do you lean into, hey, you're earning value for your data, or like the social aspect? So being able to like follow specific scientists or like see other people's thoughts on a paper that you're about to read. Which one's more compelling to you all between those two, like earning crypto for your like reference manager, actions, or like being able to like get followers for your reference manager actions / follow other people?
I think they kind of go hand in hand. Like it makes you a science communicator, kind of like a mini Andrew Huberman, right? Because you're socializing your science, and then also you have some incentive to do it. So there may be a way that you could actually say both at the same time.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, I think both are important, but for me, the incentivization, like the fact that you're getting rewarded for this, would push me to try. If I wasn't going to use it, it would be like, oh, this is great. I need to use a reference manager anyway, and I can get rewarded in crypto for doing this. That would be enough, or that would be more of an incentive to use this over competitors.
Interesting. That's good to know.
I think it's kind of hard, Pat, because like the nature of a scientist, it's like there's two. It's like bifurcated in the types of people that exist in science. Like some like truly just don't care about financial rewards, and so then it's like you're kind of gonna miss them in the bucket of if you lean into the rewards. Then there's people who like care about like getting paid more because they don't get paid anything, and so I think just the nature of science, it's so bifurcated like that it makes sense you guys were 50-50 on it. Personally, I'm also like leaning in the rewards bucket, but it's like more like a 60-40 rewards, but the socializing stuff is really cool too.
This is great feedback though, because I think we can probably like somehow include all of those concepts above the fold. Like organize papers, gain followers, get paid or something, who knows? But yeah, no, this is great. Thank you.
The only thing is, if we if we focus on the rewards, are we going to be attracting high quality reference manager users, or are we going to be incentivizing, sort of volume over quality, if that makes sense?
It's a great point. Yeah. So one thing we were thinking about is like letting anybody use the reference manager, but then basically having like a limited rollout of who can do social stuff, or like basically have the reference manager be followed. There's definitely a lot to kind of work out there, but yeah, it's a really good point where like some of the great content creators might hear earning crypto and be like, no thanks. Cool. Yeah, any other big picture thoughts here? This has been super helpful. I think we can definitely incorporate all those concepts in here. Great. Well, thank you. I think the next thing we have is Jeff put a comment here asking about the most impactful implementation of AI on the platform. And so, yeah, this is definitely something we've been thinking a lot about. We have an engineer who has like played with OpenAI's API already starting in a couple weeks. So we'll probably start to build in like some kind of like LLM focused feature. There's like, I'm sure everybody here knows, like there's like infinity directions that it could go in. Whether like we even like tried to train our own model, use OpenAI's, like just do chat with a PDF. You can spin up basically chat with a PDF in like 2 or 3 days. So that's like the absolute minimum that we could do. But for me personally, even thinking like from that last landing page, like how do you get people to use a reference manager? Like it makes a lot of sense to me to throw it into the reference manager somehow. Like, maybe it's helping you draft introduction sections. Maybe it's suggesting citations that you missed that you should include. Yeah, not 100% sure, but that feels like we'd almost be guaranteed to get people to at least try us if we had that as one of the selling points.
in this regard, I've been working with a friend of mine from work and specifically making a like a interact with a PDF with AI. One of the things that goes into considering that is that to use ChatGPT like requires tokens, depending on how much you want to work with. So I can maybe talk with you at a later point about that, because we've gotten pretty far in developing that. It's just he's on his honeymoon, so he's a little indisposed right now. But but just bringing, or once that's finished, I can help bring that over as a tool that maybe ResearchHub could use. But it would require either like a hard cap on the ability or the number of questions asked or the amount of output that you can get from it, or the ability to use RSC to generate your answers.
Yeah, totally. It's a great point. And those API calls can definitely get expensive over time. There are LLMs that I think are cheaper. We could even potentially do our own, which would be, more expensive up front, but we might be able to like kind of like customize it so it's a little bit more effective. But yeah, I guess like if we did use OpenAI's version, we'd probably end up like having some kind of research coin cost associated with it, sort of like how we have like you pay research coin to get a DOI. It, way different scale, but similar concept.
Were you considering Claude or going straight to GPT-4? Because one problem that I had with LLMs is that, I think the major limitation now LLMs have is the context window. And so if you're like thinking about giving them a text and like, chat with them or like, asking questions, you have a hard time getting the right answers, because unfortunately they lose track of like what they say, what they think. It's just they're not extended enough. Claude, by the way, has a 100K context window, and it's much better, but it's limited in use. And so yeah, open question on like what you're thinking, of using and why.
Yeah, there are a ton of choices, and it feels like more, come out like every week. So we haven't even like, I guess like fully started to dive into this. I know the easiest to spin up is OpenAI's, so it's possible that we might just, I think it depends on the feature, what we'd want to do, but it's possible we might just spin up the easiest thing first and then see if people use it. And then if people use it, start to like look at like how we can do it better. So like if people need a lot of context, maybe switching models or like doing our own. And then I know like there are some projects that actually like use a bunch of different models, and they'll like basically like divert the query to the one that's like best for whatever the question is. So yeah, there's like infinity ways to set it up. And I'm definitely not an expert. So like when we got like Florin working on this, I'll have him join one of these calls and like share sort of his like dream case scenario and hear what you guys think.
Yeah, okay, sounds good.
I think one thing that we have on ResearchHub, which is a strength, is that people are very fastidious and good and incentivized at uploading papers, especially relating to what they're looking at and their own papers. And I think that lends itself quite well to a sort of auto GPT API. So if I'm looking at a certain area, like this almost relates back to meta studies in a way, but like if I'm looking at GLP-1 agonists and I upload a bunch of papers and categorize, let's say tag them all under that project, I could then just ask AutoGPT a question and it could answer it from the papers that I've uploaded. Because on ResearchHub, we've done a fairly good job of hubs and tagging. I think that could be quite a neat way in which actually that could beat having to manually upload every time onto AutoGPT yourself.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Tyler?
Yeah, I drafted up a doc a while ago about this. And I think there's a lot of things you can do when writing a paper if you have an AI that has access to all like PubMed data and even like public repositories. Like if you're writing, it'd be awesome if you had the expert in the field sitting over your shoulder saying, that's a new idea, that needs more robust evidence, that's a contradictory statement, that doesn't match the literature, like all those things, and then kind of following the logic of the paper as you build it, and basically saying, how good is the argument that you're building as you're writing it.
Sort of the, I think, like end state implementation of this. Have you guys seen advertisements for, it's called like Conmigo? It's Khan Academy's sort of like buddy that follows you around like throughout the website. It does like exactly that. It's basically like a tutor where, like, say you're in an English class or whatever. The example they had was like, what's the meaning, or read an essay about the symbolic meaning of the end of Moby Dick. And the LLM is being like, hey, like, you structured this argument poorly. Like, if you remove this sentence and like added more evidence to point 2, then like it would be so much more compelling. So yeah, I think like something like that, where it's like, you're sitting at an MDPI paper right now, but if you were to like, change like, the result listed here and add another experiment, like maybe you've got a cell paper, some kind of like editorial assistance, I think would be pretty cool.
Exactly. And it alleviates like the number one concern of all scientists, which is that they haven't read the full field, or they're missing some information, or they're misinterpreting. So then they're more likely to like do stuff a little faster and trust themselves and just move quicker. I would pay for it personally.
Totally. Yeah, there's so many cool things we can do, because one thing Kobe and I were even talking about is like having experts chat with the model in order to basically say like, hey, correct this model when it says something that's wrong, in order to like pay people who do it and then have the model get better. But like if you had all the experts in a field, like there would be certain places where 2 different experts are like giving the model different feedback, and you could like specifically highlight where there's disagreement in fields among experts and then fund experiments in those like areas, so there's a lot of really, really cool things that I think we could do in the future with this kind of thing. So yeah, keep the brains turning, because I bet we're only like 10% scratching the surface right now.
It reminds me of that. You guys remember on those like Pentium 3 Windows 95 computers, the little shitty paperclip that was like in the bottom corner? This kind of reminds me of like a smart paperclip, but like we could use like the ResearchHub Flask or something cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing that can be threaded in here, and Clippy. One thing we could thread in here too is like reputation, because like how do you assess who's like an expert, or you don't want like people to come spam like training the LLM and they're like not cut out to train it and give their feedback. So just a comment about weighting things with reputation or filtering by reputation to be able to train the LLM.
Totally. I feel like that's what would give us an advantage versus, other, scientific venues, is like understanding people's reputation, letting there be weighted feedback, based on it.
Totally. I had one comment, just generally, if no one has anything else for the AI stuff. I was talking to my wife, who is really intrigued on like the notebook feature, and she keeps coming back to this idea of like using the notebook and having predefined templates for different techniques. So like if you're running a Western blot, like here's the Western blot template, and while you're when you're typing in, instead of going to your lab notebook, you just say the date, and then like I use there's prefillable things like primary antibody, secondary antibody, exposure time for the Western blot. And these things are almost like an Airtable like fillable thing, where it's like actually like stored in like a database. And when you go to write your paper, it's a lot easier to now just like reference this, and it makes it a lot easier to include like a detailed flow of your method, which is what you don't see in papers now. In papers, they say, here, we did this and this, and they don't go into the details of what they really did. And it's hard to recapitulate a lot of those papers because the method's not fully fleshed out. And so she was thinking that it'd be a really great way to alleviate some of those problems in science if we just had predefined templates, which by the way, she said she'd be happy to create for some of the techniques she's familiar with. And even to store like inventory for your lab. So you can easily just say, I use this product, and it'll auto-fill in, or it has metadata for the catalog number and all these things. So just curious to hear your guys' thoughts on that. And if you guys think it's a cool idea, I'll have Sam take a stab at a few of those templates.
I think it's a super cool idea. Have you heard of protocols.io before, Jeff? Have you seen this? I'm not sure if it's like exactly what you're describing, but it's sort of similar.
I haven't looked into this, no.
It's basically like a social network for methods, kind of, where people can publish their methods and have them go like alongside publications. And so I think there's a way to try and find like the mean method for like a specific experiment, and then try and auto generate those like templates. And even like I really like this idea a lot, because like I think the very, very end state of ResearchHub, what it should be, is not even doing papers at all, but people just publish those Western blots. You just publish like a live stream of data, and then you alongside anyone else can use that data in order to construct like a larger argument. And so yeah, it would be really, really cool if we could like help people publish data in a way that like makes it really easy for them to do so, including like keeping methods.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna send this her way, and then maybe just have her do a few just to get the gears moving, and just see if it's something that's got legs or not.
Totally. It also kind of reminds me of benchling a little bit. Like I think benchling kind of does this for molecular biology, and it's super duper helpful. So I could see that being extended to lots of different fields.
Okay. Okay. Right on. Okay. Thanks for the feedback, guys.
One more thing kind of along these lines is that like getting closer to like, I think Balaji talked about the like derivative of publications and how you can kind of like cite on chain, but it'd be really cool if you could embed larger amounts of text in your paper as you're writing it, and then automatically like link it to the citation manager. So instead of having to like rewrite your entire introduction every single time when you're in the same field writing the same paper, you could sort of like embed that citation in it. And then it's kind of like a pseudo notebook outline, but it's like you don't need to rewrite it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I even think it's like that's what the LLM would be so helpful for, is you just have like a collection of references, and you can like pick and choose which ones you want to add to any given publication depending on what's relevant to it. And then it just spits out the sentences.
Yeah, that'd be super helpful.
Cool. Yeah, so thank you guys. It's been super helpful. I guess any last minute thoughts, feedback, comments in general before we get out of here? Cool. Well, thanks everybody. I guess we'll see you next week.
Yep. Bye everyone.
Yeah. Bye.
See you guys.
See you guys.
Good to see everyone. Thanks.